I wanted to explore um, some aspects of dialogue, communication, and learning. And to set the context for that, I wanted to share with you a few things, and then we'll go into this. So one is I've just been back from a trip to India where I was doing different workshops at schools that were founded originally by Krishnamurthy schools in South India, and it was for teachers and so on. And we looked at different aspects of uh, learning and communication. And one aspect of learning and communication, which I'd like to explore actively, I mean, there's a lot to draw on if one were to just take that theme on dialogue to look at some of the challenges and questions raised by Krishnamurti, some of the questions and challenges raised by David Bohm, some of the questions and challenges raised in our own lives. And I want to just take up two themes that I would like to explore so that it isn't just me sort of walking people through something that I already know. And that is, let me first share with you two aspects of dialogue. And this is from the book On Dialogue um, by David Bohm. And there's the introduction to it, which Peter Senge has written. And I thought it would be timely to just share the end of that introduction. In short, David Bohm's basic aim was a different and more viable way of living together. He knew that in a world of growing interdependence, people who cannot do this are headed inevitably toward escalating conflict. As a physicist, his life had been dedicated to understanding a participatory universe where meaning is continually unfolding. As a human being, he believed that the present crisis offered a unique opportunity to bring that same sort of understanding into the center of human affairs. It is easy to dismiss Bohm as a romantic idealist. By his own assessment, he envisioned, quote, a kind of culture which, as far as I can tell, has never really existed, except perhaps very long ago, end of quote. But my experiences over the past 15 years with both the possibility and challenge of dialogue leads me to see him quite differently. I would call David Bohm an extreme realist. I knew that no society has ever faced the sort of global predicament we face. He knew that no society has ever faced the sort of global predicament we face, and that we are not likely to muddle through without radical changes in our way of being together. And then I will just take this one excerpt to do with dialogue itself. So I give a meaning to the word dialogue that is somewhat different, and this is Bohm. The previous section was from Peter Senge writing the introduction. This is from Bohm. I give a meaning to the word dialogue that is somewhat different from what is commonly used. The derivations of words often help to suggest a deeper meaning. Dialogue comes from the Greek word dialogos. Logos, some of you probably can pronounce it more accurately. Logos means the word, or in our case, we would think of the meaning of the word. And dia means through. Through. It doesn't mean to. A dialogue can be among any number of people, not just two. Even one person can have a sense of dialogue within themselves if the spirit of the dialogue is present. The picture or image that this derivation suggests is of a stream of meaning flowing among and through us and between us. This will make possible a flow of meaning in the whole group, out of which may emerge some new understanding. It's something new which may not have been in the starting point at all. Contrast this with the word discussion, which has the same root as percussion and concussion. It really means to break things up. It emphasizes the idea of analysis, where there may be many points of view and where everybody is presenting a different one, analyzing and breaking up. That obviously has its value, but it is limited and it will not get us very far beyond our various points of view. Discussion is almost like a ping pong game where people are batting the ideas back and forth, and the object of the game is to win or to get points for yourself. Possibly you will take up somebody else's ideas to back up your own. You may agree with some, disagree with others, but the basic point is to win the game. That's very frequently the case in a discussion. In a dialogue, however, nobody is trying to win. So I just stopped there with that. And I think there are two senses in which I wanted to explore this notion of dialogue, not necessarily starting with a group format for all of us, but like the what I had shared initially, the story that I had shared, to ground our questions in the particular and in our own experiences, so that it's not an abstract conversation about love or compassion or education or any of those big words, but just grounding it in very specific experiences. And the other one was to raise a question that is genuinely a question for us, to which we haven't already figured out or got an answer. So that's a burning question that has its significance in our lives. That's sort of grounded in our daily life, and that to which we don't have an answer. So it's not a kind of question that is a disguised opinion or something that's trying to communicate something that I've already think is of value, but really a question to which I haven't figured out the answer. So I was intending to do for us to work in pairs, but let's try and figure this out. Since we can't do it with this format, let me try and suggest another format. Okay, let's try it. I don't know if this will this will work, or we'll try it this way. So if we can just take a moment to really figure out some burning question that has significance and relevance in our daily lives, and also really ground it in this daily life situation or experience, so that it's clear to the rest of us where this question is coming from. It's not an abstract question. Let's just take a moment to think that through, and then we can go around and share with each other. A genuine burning question to which I haven't really figured out the answer.
Gopal, do you mean that I want to remember your example of not knowing how to manage that teaching moment?
It not the example that I shared at all, but something that in your daily experience, something that has had significance.
Okay.
And that one, that was just to kind of set the context for giving us reason to proceed with a question to which we don't actually know the answer. So it's you can set up the context for us yourself. I mean, also, I was just because I've just come from South India, I was also feeling, and I'd just be honest and conversational about it. I felt sort of people were in some of the workshops we did quite willing to share things that were real, not so much positive or success stories and so on, but that were real for them in their lives. Some of the struggles, some of the questions they hadn't figured out. So I was quite touched by that. And coming back in the US, when things seem quite bleak, it seems that the pendulum oscillates between despair and having this thing that we must look at everything positively. It seems to sort of oscillate in this way. So I was just saying, not positive, negative, but something that is real, that touches us, that is grounded in our daily lives, to which we haven't got an answer. Okay, shall we go around? And hi, Phil.
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Sorry I'm late. I had a dental emergency.
Oh, are you okay now? Okay. You're not going to ask what's the root of pain, are you? Okay. Well, I hope you're feeling better. Let's go around. And so each person can share. Now comes the second request, or the second challenge. And it's this again, it came to my mind from a friend saying something like this. He was speaking about, not in the sense of what David Bohm has written about dialogue being meaning moving through, but this friend was recently shared this notion of speaking to be heard and listening to be changed. But I thought that this part of listening to be changed, I think we've kind of often practiced the speaking to be heard quite extensively, and amplified that. But this listening to be changed, I think, is something that might warrant more attention. So, in that spirit, I'm going to invite each one of us, maybe we will start with pairs, and each one of us to, or even groups of three, let's just do it with groups of three, to listen to the other person and to really see what is striking in what someone else's question is and what they share, so that when we go through what everybody has shared and come back to round two, I am not any more focused on my question, but for example, I am sharing what chord was struck for me or what resonated for me, say in Rebecca's question, what I take from Rebecca's question. So yeah, does that make sense? I haven't tried it in this format. I was hoping that we'd work in pairs, but let's try it out. And if it doesn't work, we'll abandon the format and just continue the conversation. So how shall we organize it? In smaller groups, I'll just look at my screen. Shall we just have two people? Okay, Camden and Andrea. And let's say Gopal and Rebecca, Kim and Robin, Cheryl and Phil, and Yada, is that correct? And Michelle, and Anu, would you like to join us?
Hi, I would love to join. However, I'm in the middle of some settings right now, and so I don't think I'd be able to share to the best of my abilities.
Okay. Okay. So let's just work in these groups, and each one of us listens out to our partner and listens and sees in what they're saying, what is of resonance, what resonates for us, what is their question and experience raise for us, what kinds of questions does it raise for us? Yeah. And then the second time around, we can share from that. Yeah, so let's start. We can start with Robin. So Robin and Kim, was it?
All right. So Kim, I've been interacting a lot with new friends, and I especially am totally enjoying my Quaker friends. And one friend and I, we sat and had like an hour and a half conversation, and I did it in a tea house where there was lots of noise around, which a lot of people understand that's a little hard for me, but it was such a good conversation. And as we, in the midst of the conversation, I said, one of the things I really like about Quakers is how they hold silence in between talking. And that helps me to be able to communicate better. But my burning question is, how do I have those kind of conversations with people who are not Quakers or holistic educators? That's my burning question.
Okay, so I was thinking about the difference between being in a conversation and being in a large group interaction and noticing one's own need to act, to intervene when an individual doesn't recognize how they're affecting the group's interaction. It's not exactly a question. It's like self-awareness. It's like when to act, when does one intervene, when a person who can't be aware of themselves enough to recognize their impact on a group.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gopal.
Okay. Thanks. So the next, was it Phil and Cheryl? Or did it seem to get switched around my screen? Yeah.
I thought it was Phil and Rebecca, but I could be wrong.
Oh,
No,
okay.
That's-
Whichever way. Yeah, I thought it was Gopal and Rebecca, but but we can try.
I I think I was going to be with Phil, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
My question just came to me, and it has to do with dialogue. There's a point that Baum makes in his book that the topic can turn on a dime. Well, I'll just leave it at that. Somebody may be speaking, and then it brings a thought to the other person which doesn't have anything to do with what the other one was saying, and it takes off from there. And my question is, how does that not create a lot of problems? Because the first person's thinking, well, you must not have understood what I was saying, or you've just taken this off on a tangent that you want to talk about. How do you do that in dialogue? Just allow a change like that, and not want to say, hey, let's get back to what the point I made, or my question. Okay, that's enough said.
Thank you for that. Yeah, my question was quite simple, actually. It was like, in what ways might I live my beliefs? Or I had the word live what I teach, or beliefs. It's the same thing, because I talk about many of these things like dialogue and observation and love, and there's a reflective part in a dialogue. When you're in that kind of a dialogue in a teaching framework where has to be time to reflect on your own practice, on who you are and what feet you're standing in. Who is it that's speaking? If that's clear.
Thanks. So maybe can be Rebecca and me, and then it could be Piada and Chris. can you pronounce your name for me, please? Krishni?
Nai.
Nai.
Sorry,
Krishnai.
I'm late.
All right. Okay. So maybe I can just clarify a little bit. So I started with a story that I shared, and then we looked at some aspects of the meaning of dialogue. And one of the things we wanted to focus on is also listening carefully to what someone else is saying and seeing what questions arise for myself in that listening and what resonates. So that's one thing. And then the other one was if we can ground our what we share in a burning question, a genuine question to which we don't really know the answer, but that's grounded in our daily experience, not something lofty and abstract, but really grounded in a very specific aspect of our daily experience. So something that raises a burning question from our daily experience we share, and then we can share the burning question. And then the other person listens and sees what it evokes for them. So maybe, yeah, Rebecca, we can go into it. I shared a long story, so I'm rather hesitant to share it all over again. But I guess the burning question I have is still, what is teaching and what is learning, and what on earth is teaching if telling someone what I know doesn't help their learning? So that's still continues to be a burning question. So I'm interested to hear from you, Rebecca, what your...
It's interesting because the last few months I've been doing some research on listening to children and hearing their voices and how that should be impacting our work. So and I've got one burning question, but one of the pieces that came up was adult biases that come with us, our adulting that comes into our practices because of our own lived experiences and our assumptions of what children should be and how we should be teaching them. And there's some work being done right now about honoring the moment with the child and listening to the child, us being quiet and hearing their lived experiences and weaving those lived experiences into the classroom culture and honoring each individual child because they all come from different backgrounds. And we may not agree with television at home or video games at home, but that is the child's lived experiences. What I have learned and been humbled by is how articulate a child can be when we turn over that moment to them and allow them to speak their lived experiences. They come with their stories. Hey teacher, guess what I did yesterday? Wait a minute, we're not talking about that right now. Even researchers in early learning classrooms have had to step back and confront their own biases as they come to the research because of their assumptions of what a child should be or shouldn't be. So even the research that we're churning out, how much of the child's voice is really in our research. So I ask, is the child's voice the center of my interactions and conversations, or am I guiding their conversations for some sort of outcome? Because as those know, here in the States, we've got these standards-based assessments, standards-based accountability. So many of the strategies within classrooms are outcome-based, and it will drive the whole day towards this checklist that a teacher has to carry around. So my final question is, how do I honor the child?
Hey, thanks. And then maybe Camden and Andrea, and then we can go to the others. Yeah.
So right now I'm, the experience I'm reflecting on. We recently had snow here in Georgia, and today we were outside with the kids, and we were looking for tracks of animals in the snow, and they got in this like rhythm where they started finding a lot of rabbit and deer tracks, and they just started shouting every time they found one. I deer, bunny, bunny, deer, deer. And it was like, you know, just this like intense like flow moment of like them just being like so like captivated by the experience of following these animals. And one of the young ones was like, if we followed these tracks all the way, there'd be a real deer over there. And it was just like a really like a capstone of the experience. But for me, it's like, how do I give that space? How do I make room or be a guide so that they can find that anywhere they go, with whatever they're discovering, with whatever they're exploring, or with however we adventure together or spend time together? How can I make sure I'm creating that space for them?
I didn't have a question for most of this conversation, and I started to feel really nervous as my turn I knew would come around the corner eventually. And as I didn't have a question, I was really aware of how I was trying really hard to make that question come, but then noticing how that drew me away from actually listening to others' questions, and kind of having this little volleyball game in my experience of well, I need a question, but I need to listen. And then as we progressed, and especially now listening to Camden, who I knew was my partner, and really trying to let go, it feels like my question is, how can I be more present?
Krishna, you would like to share first, or me? I might share first. Okay. So when you give me the speed of thinking of questions in my brain, I have around 10 questions. But then when you address that, it need to be burning questions. So it's one question from 10 questions is pop up in me that now I'm working as a leaders in a big team. But I found that it's very difficult. Sometimes it's very difficult for me to, to listen to adult. I'm very good in listening to the little one. But for me, sometimes it's difficult to listen to adult and not follow my thoughts. Sometimes my thoughts can drag me around with my experience, and I'm not really truly listen to the person who's speaking. And sometimes I judge the person who's speaking with me in my negative thoughts, in my negative feelings, or my negative background about them. So that is very suffering for me. It dragged me to another part of I am upset with myself that why I keep judging others, why I'm not really trust what they say, why this kind of feeling happened with me, and I don't like that feeling that happened with me. So my question is, how can I learn or moving on from this kind of feelings in this kind of difficult situations? Thank you.
So I could share a question if you'd like. I guess I'm wondering how listening can become a tool for teaching. Following up on Rebecca's point a minute ago, I'm taking a course with Otto Scharmer, who's an MIT professor, brilliant man, goes around the world really, teaching management and talking to the president's cabinet in Uganda or Malaysia or someplace like that. And so he distinguishes 4 levels of listening. He said the first level is basically listening for what you agree with. And you know, the response will be, oh yeah, I did something like that, and then proceed to share what you experienced that's similar to what you're hearing. The second level is listening for what you disagree with. And that leads to sometimes argumentation, but in contrast, in a way, both of those are distancing you from the speaker that you're listening to. The third level, I can't remember to tell the truth, but the fourth level is a really significant one where you are doing what Otto Scharmer coaches you to do in another part of the course, which is to learn from the emerging future. What you're listening for is you become the midwife, and what you listen for is what wants to be born, what wants to come out of this discussion or listening process from a larger perspective. And it's almost like a spiritual exercise. You train yourself so that you can be open mind, open heart, and open will, so that you're not colored by cynicism or negativism, criticism, or fear. Fear undermines the will. Anyway, I think that's kind of a pregnant question of how can we use listening in the most creative way to teach.
So for the second round, what I suggest is we'd go around, and if we can speak to what what was evoked for us in what our partner shared, and not, if they've asked a question, not answer their question, but in listening to the other person, the partner, what was evoked for us, and possibly even ask some questions, not only of the partner, but also of ourselves. So in some sense, making their question our own. So what does that evoke for us in the listening of it?
Thank you for that next step, Gopal. That's interesting. I kind of feel like I started to do it already. As I jotted down what Kim had said, I started to integrate it into my own questioning framework. And so, because I don't have an answer to it for sure, but I grapple also, and that's the agreeing level, I guess, with that when people intervene, when do we intervene? When people are not being aware in a larger discussion. And what I heard Kim saying was about that when you do have big discussions, often there will be an individual or 2 or 3 who don't always recognize the impact they're having on other people. And really, as I recognize that impact, is there a simple casual action that I can take without being overtly confrontational? That's kind of where I go with the question you were asking, and I think it is a helpful question to keep grappling with what you asked. So
Thank you, Robin. So I'll admit that, sorry, we can't have breakout rooms. We'll figure that out. We will next time. But my reaction is, I wrote down holding silence, and I wrote it down sort of just like an aspiration. I wrote it down like, oh yeah, oh yeah. Recognize that I work mostly with secondary and post-secondary students, which is way different than Rebecca. And so what your question raised for me, Robin, was back to teaching strategies. And it was more like, what practices, what curriculum, what group work could I include in particular lessoning? Not like, but you know what I mean. That would allow students who haven't ever had the experience to, quote, hold silence as a concept. You know, how to introduce hold silence to students as a notion. That's all.
You know, my response to Cheryl is parallel to the response about listening, because as she was talking about how what happens when a dialogue slips, feels like it slips into something that I wasn't, where I didn't want it to go, where I wanted to stay with the essence of what was being talked about. And I've had that experience where I've just had to question myself. Why do I have that need? And I've also had the experience of not being able to quell that need and actually saying something. And a third response was just being silent and watching, observing the room go silent as well, which is giving it over, giving up, not giving up, but letting it flow. This is in real-time dialogue. Most of my work for the last 25 years has been in an online environment where we practice dialogue, but it's automatic because there's nobody to dialogue with. It's asynchronous. So you do take time and you do have time to reflect and speak and listen and respond. I never realized that in the beginning of this work, that you would have that in an online environment. And it's kind of refreshing to have that. But in real time, I actually felt when you were talking about letting the conversation slip out, how it feels and why I feel that way. I don't know. I mean, that's stuff I'm always looking at. But thank you for that question.
So Bill's question was, in what ways might I live what I believe? And who is it that is speaking? Who is it that is asking that? If I feel like you made it too easy for me, Phil, because I think okay, this is an assumption. I'm not supposed to make assumptions, or else I'm supposed to turn and unpack the assumption. But I feel like it. I think you asked that question so that everybody else would, well, as Gopal said, make the question your own. So I think I was feeling like you wanted everybody to be asking themselves, in what ways might I live what I believe?
Hmm. Hmm.
That's what came to me. Because I think that you have a lot of those answers. um, there again, that's an assumption. But knowing who you are, I just, I assumed that you would have had that a lot of that figured out. So I'm thinking that you just want everybody to be asking that question, and it's a good question for us all to grapple with. How might we live what I believe?
Cheryl, I'm always looking for what's underneath the underneath. I don't think in this lifetime is long enough to totally come to peace with that.
Thanks. So I just thought in the question that you raised, Rebecca, I think the question of how do I honor the child, and the discussion about listening and voice and adult biases. And I got me thinking about, I don't quite know what honoring means, but I was trying to get at what might be behind the question, and two other questions came to my mind from your question. And one is, what kind of person is a child? And what kind of person is an adult? And if I stopped being a child myself, when did that happen?
That's a pretty heavy reflection. I think everyone could sit with that. And I mean, developmentally, we could go into, by the time you're 8 or 9 years old, you start understanding things a little bit better, a little differently. My sweet husband's offering me food. But, when do we start thinking more like an adult? And we've had 8 or 9 years of experience with adults. So now we're going into that world because our understanding of humor and other things is developmentally changing. For each of us to answer that question, and then what is the adult? And our lived experiences will speak to that. What is an adult? That's what the child sees.
So do you have any responses to the questions I raised, and any questions?
Do I have any questions? Oh, go ahead, Phil.
Can I ask Rebecca to say that last part again? What is an adult? Who?
From the child's perspective, what is an adult? Because they're going to move gradually into that role, and they're going to bring their lived experiences and the assumptions of others that they've been packing. Now, it doesn't mean it's neutral, it's not good or bad. But when I look at myself, I see my mother, I see my dad, I see their parents. So we have this history, this genealogical history that follows each of us. So what is the adult? And then, you get 20 of them, little 3, 4, and 5-year-olds in a small space called a classroom. And then we don't want them to eat each other. And it's, so who, they're bringing what they know. And in their play, many of them want to be older. They play the adult role. in their dramatic play. I'm going to be the mommy. I'm going to be the daddy. And that's very interesting to watch as they dramatically play out these roles that they understand in their little minds. You get a view into what their homes are like.
Rebecca, I'm curious on your reflections of Gopal's question too.
Of what is the adult?
Not my listening to your questions and my immediate questions, but to what I had shared originally.
Oh, originally the story?
Because just as I listened to you and raised questions in terms of
The story you told about the little girl?
and then the questions I had raised.
My question for you is, were you humbled by that moment?
No, not your question for me, but having listened to it, what question occurs for you?
One of the questions that, well, again, I come back is, how do I honor the child? How do I honor the child in those moments? Children have humbled me. They have humbled me so many times with those kinds of remarks. It's almost like getting put in your place. So that what she said to you, I'm sitting there going, oh, I've had those moments. So how do I honor the child? And now how do I teach others how to honor children? So how do you honor the child?
But Gopal, what was your question from that description of the experience?
The last few questions. So what is teaching? What is learning? And after 30 years, I've been told many answers, but I really don't know. And I think that's reason enough to proceed. And I'm skeptical of answers to any of these foundational questions.
Those foundational questions put
Especially by experts like us.
Yeah. A question that one of my mentors would ask about this is, in our teaching, is it teaching to have power over children? Or is it teaching to have power with and for children?
Thanks. I just want to make sure we if we have a moment, can we just get to Camden and Andrea? Is there time enough?
We can be quick.
You can be quick. You want to go first, or you want me to go first?
I can go first this time. When you were reliving the story of following footprints, and of course I was with you when that story happened, I felt like I was there again in that moment. And one of the questions I had, but what is that? You're talking about creating a certain space. What is that space? What is that experience of the child that we're moving toward? What is that? And just realizing that in the story itself, of hearing what that space was, being curious about looking at where we were, what the children were doing, there felt like there was already so many answers within just the story itself of what that space was, but also so much more to explore of really what understanding how that feeling and that experience came to be.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and what you shared about the presence piece, it was, and being curious about how to be present. And, I definitely felt like some sadness, like, oh, I don't want you to be anxious about finding a question. Oh, no, you don't have to do that. It's okay. I noticed that. And then I thought what Chris shared, who's gone, but about like that midwifery sort of that emergent future, and like that the qualities of being there, like that. I like, he also said like something about trusting the will to, that you'll find the right spot, or so yeah, I think my questions around that end up being yeah, just in those lines.
Thank you. Yeah, so I don't know in terms of the time we have and the format, but one thing, if we were to continue digging in, as it were, I think it would be to really take specific questions, and maybe, as Phil shared, if there's even time for reflection, when it's written out, for example, there's time for sitting with it and take these questions and really go into them without providing answers. I think that's something that would be really interesting to see what other questions emerge from these. We have plenty of experts, including ourselves, who figured out answers to age-old questions. But to figure out questions that are that can come alive from these, I think is what interests me at this time. So if we had the time, I think we might go into these questions more and see what other questions are birthed or rise from those, and to sort of to hang on to those questions in our lives. I mean, yeah, and as that story kind of not demonstrated, even as that story kind of gave the context, I find increasingly all the answers I've got over a period of time of not uh, very significant. What really seems to matter is the holding of these questions, so that one can look further at things that I've taken for granted or feel that I've understood, so that there is no point of arrival. And it's not necessarily a feel good, but it feels important. So that's what I wanted to also share. If there's an opportunity, we can take up these questions further and go into them. So
Thank you.
you.
Thank Gopal. This was so helpful for me to see how, even though you did it off the cuff of putting us into pairs, but listening carefully to one other person, even though we were listening to everyone, and then going to that next level of really seeing how that person's question bounced off of us and then reformulated into a new way. It was a very helpful process. And I would like personally to invite you back into this group to go to the next level with this, because I found it so helpful. Not always feel good, but sometimes just kind of paying attention to the other people in the group in new ways by how we did it today.
Yeah, and I add to that, and maybe this is where that story resonates, a kind of discontent with arrival.
Mm.
For arrival, I spent 25 years living with the woman that I loved, and we would go round and round and round and round about things. And when we found the right question, we were happy. We didn't have to answer it.
Yeah.
All we had to do was find the right question.
Beautiful.
I thank you. Thanks everyone for being a part of this conversation, and Gopal for bringing everyone here. I agree with Robin. It feels like this dialogue is a learning process, that I have to be a part of a group who's willing to engage in it to continue to understand what it means for myself, how to do it in not just teaching and that education world, but in life. And so I agree with Robin, inviting you back I will certainly be reaching out, and Phil as well has also helped us with dialogue. And if either of you have others that would, if you're busy, but I think that this is really important for us as educators to continue these. So just expressing gratitude and hoping to continue to create space for this.
No, there is a way. I mean, I'll write you.
Okay. Thanks, Phil.
Yeah, I'm happy to revisit it, and maybe next time we can plan a little bit more of a different kind of format, so that we jump in already, sort of already.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you, everyone.
Bye bye.
Thank you.